Hello, welcome to Manabil, and welcome to part 36 of my deconstruction of Keith Frankish's lecture series on illusionism. And we are around the 1 hour and 26 minutes into lecture 4, Objections to Illusionism. And this particular objection is the representation objection. And sorry for the sort of dark picture. It's a gloomy day today. There's not much light in the northern hemisphere at the moment, right? So let me just dive into it and let's see how it goes. I hopefully I can finish lecture 4 with this part and maybe get an idea of how much of part 5, or is there part 6, I believe, I need to do in order to get this done. I don't want to carry on much further, but I would like to, do the whole thing as best I can, right? So let's dive in.
One final objection, the representation objection. Okay, so the objection goes like this. Illusionists deny that phenomenal properties are real, but they claim that we represent ourselves as having phenomenal properties. We think about phenomenal properties. We have the concept of a phenomenal property. So how do we manage to do this? Phenomenal properties don't exist. How do we manage to represent them? How do we...
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to call something an illusion, there has to be something that you call an illusion, right? Now, if he says that the realist is saying that phenomenal properties do not exist, how can you call them an illusion if they don't exist? Is this a straw man attempt, or I'm just, it's like when I get a sort of an idea of what he's saying, then some new sentence appears that sort of contradicts my previous understanding. Then if I change my understanding, then it gets back to it, and or there's a third understanding. This is just a pile of nonsense, in my opinion, right? I wouldn't even if you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't follow this. Maybe I would. $1 million, that's a lot of money. But, this is so crazy to me, right? I simply cannot understand how this dude has come this far. What dicks have he sucked? What asses has he licked? I mean, this philosophy is completely dysfunctional, in my opinion, right? I'm not saying everything is complete madness or anything like that, but at core points, it's like it sticks in all directions, or it's contradictory, or it's like it's a word salad, and it's like when it becomes important to be very sharp, he's completely loose, right? And when it's time to be very focused and spend a bit of time on explaining, he doesn't do that. But he spent a lot of time explaining all sorts of minuscule things that are not that important, in my opinion, right? So at least the presentation of the philosophy here, right, is dysfunctional, in my opinion. It's useless, man, right? It's useless in the sense that no person in the right mind would attempt using this as any kind of idea or foundation for further study, for adapting into their own philosophy, anything like that. It's perforated like a sieve. It's like it's incoherent. It's polemic. It's the lacking definitions and so on, right? There's so many things to point to that doesn't function for me, right? And then this, if phenomenal properties do not exist, well, how can you talk about them if they do not exist? I mean, it's sort of implicit in what he says, right? If an illusion has to somehow be available to you in order to you to call it, and there has to be something going on, right? You can't say there's nothing going on and that is an illusion. That's crazy to me, right? So when he writes this, it just like, I'm sort of, what the hell, man, right? It doesn't fit with what you're trying to do here, right? It contradicts your whole argument, your whole philosophy here. Oh, man.
Even acquire these concepts. We acquire concepts of things around us in the world because we're in touch with those things, and people point them out to us and say the word for them, and we gradually acquire the concept. How do we acquire phenomenal concepts? How do we acquire concepts of things that just don't exist?
I just had a sort of, I don't know why I had that thought, but, it's sort of a side note, right? But I was just, for some reason, I saw myself in sort of a lecture room, and I'm sitting on the front bench because I'm proactive, right? And up there, a few meters away is Keith Frankish, trying to lecture me on illusions, right? And I keep pounding questions at him, right? So, but you just said that yesterday. How does that fit with that? That seems like a contradiction. If I was pounding him with all these deconstructive comments I have presented to you during all these multiple deconstruction videos, right? What would his reaction be? What would the other students' reaction be, right? It is. I have a very strong sense that all the other students would attack me for criticizing Keith Frankish, right? I'm not saying that, it's just hypothetical, right? But how is your everyday when you start to question the narrative, right? I mean, I have experienced so many times that when you start to question the narrative, all sorts of people start to attack you, saying you should do this and you shouldn't take it this way, you should understand it that way, and so on, right? And it's also this appeal to authority. If this guy's sitting there explaining this shit to me, right, and I would come with contrary arguments or pointing weaknesses out here, there, and everywhere, right? How would that, that study of mine in philosophy, how would that end? At some point, the management of the university or whatever would sort of grab me and pull me into some kind of discussion and say, you have to behave, we have to, that's what would happen. So, nobody in academia are critical to a level where they challenge whatever narrative is going on in that university, right? That's why we have all these droning, lecturing, boring, incoherent academics who are just sort of pushing their agenda, pushing the narrative, just sort of finding a pet subject over here that they can sort of elaborate on without challenging it from the rest of philosophy, so to say, right? So they can get away with stuff they might not get away with if they have to get the full picture in some kind of treaty, right? This kind of pet subject that he's doing here, illusionism, it fits like, in no way with other parts of philosophy. And as I pointed out several times, that he's talking about truth and knowledge and ethics within a discussion of what I would call metaphysics, or an aspect of metaphysics, right? That just points that he's sort of let loose in this little sandbox called illusionism, and he's just coming up with all sorts of weird stuff, right? And because it's not challenged by the rest of philosophical thinking, then it's not criticized, you could say, right? Okay, so Just my 2 cents.
And how do these phenomenal concepts get their content? How do they come to be about the things they're about?
So now we're talking about concept. Has he defined, how does that fit with the rest? How do phenomenal concept get their, shouldn't it be concepts? Isn't it plural, right? So there's a sort of grammatic error there also, right? How do phenomenal concepts, it must be, get their content? But what is the phenomenal concept now? I don't think he's mentioned phenomenal concepts, right? Before. So what is that? He's just bringing it sort of, oh, there's a new word there. Fuck off, man, right?
I think of a concept as some sort of state of the brain, like a mental symbol, as we talked about in the first lecture, that represents something in the world. How does it get to represent that thing in the world? One way in which, one theory of how mental...
But represent, what in the world? What is the world? Well, how do you get to that, the world? As if you know complete, have understanding of that thing, the world. And then you have this other realm where there are representations that might be incorrect, and you're sort of doubting those are illusions. How do you get to that world over there, man, right? How do you get to that? How do you have access to it, right? And how can you be so cocksure about its contents and understandings? And if you have that perfect world there, why do you need those representations then? Right? Answer me that, Batman, right? This is so unbelievably stupid, man, right? Oh, man, it's incredible.
Mental symbols get to represent things in the world is that they do so because they're causally sensitive to the presence of those things. So if there's a little pattern of brain firing, say, represents dogs, it's because that pattern of neurons fires when we come into contact with a dog, when we see a dog or hear a dog bark or whatever.
We come into contact with the dog. What do you mean by that, right? You hear a dog bark, and that's a qualia, or an interpretation of a qualia, right? A certain sound that you interpret as barking. But then now it's an interpretation. Now it's a qualia and an interpretation of qualia. Then it's not that world out there, because you're talking about those representations, right? It's like you're actually only working with representations, and then you're imagining that to be something outside your mind. How do you get to do that? Right? And how does that all of a sudden become that thing that is a reference point to whether or not those experiences are correct or not, or illusions or not, right? You can't riddle yourself out of these circles, man, right? It's paradoxical, right? Nobody should use this. This is stupid, man, right? This man should be defunded and put in the streets immediately, right? He's confusing people more than anything else. Actually, the only thing he's doing here is confusing people, right? Making everything more cumbersome and stupid and confusing and doubtful, and nothing works here, right? It's just a big pile of words in the end.
When we have some interaction with a dog, it causes this little this little group of neurons to fire, and that's how that group of neurons comes to represent dogs. Well,
how does a neuron? Why does a neuron fire? Does the neuron know there's a dog outside the neuron? So, there's a dog out there. For some magical reason, this neuron understands there is dog, right? So now I'm creating dog in here. But if there's a dog in here, it can't be the same dog as out there, right? And if it already knows there's a dog out there, why does it need to make a copy representation in the mind? Don't you get this is a problem? Oh, man.
How do phenomenal
Sorry if I get a little carried away, man, but what pisses me off is that these people who have no fucking clue of what they're talking about get airtime here, right? Telling people to doubt this and this is illusion and that doesn't work and just trust what your masters tell you, right? And, pull the lever on the trolley problem and just kill one instead of five and so on, right? Which is sort of eluding at with sort of a utilitarian approach to ethics, right? It is, and it's sort of, it seems so innocent, this, right? But in the end, it's like, it might end up, killing millions of people because they were not supposed to trust their, illusions, right? That's what pisses me off.
concepts get their referent. It can't be by being causally sensitive to the presence of phenomenal properties, since phenomenal properties don't exist on the according to the illusionist. So, how do we manage to think about these things, to represent these things to ourselves, if they don't exist?
There he said it again, right? Phenomenal properties do not exist. Now he writes phenomenal concepts. So it was this confusion of terms, right? In order for him to discuss qualia, he has brought in like 25 different terms in order to juggle this around. And there's no real definitions, in my opinion, right? Not something that I trust, at least. And also this, how do phenomenal... It's a rhetorical question, right? How do phenomenal concepts capture the richness of phenomenality? But he just said that it doesn't exist. But so the properties do not exist, but then the concepts exist. What are the concepts then, if there's no properties? I mean, how can this be a professorship? I mean, oh man, right?
And also, how can these symbols, these representations of phenomenal concepts, how can they capture the richness of phenomenality? They might allow us to think about phenomenal properties, but how do they manage to capture the seeming reality of the things, the vividness, the presence of these apparent presence of these qualitative properties? It's not just that we're thinking of something. We think of something imaginary, like as a unicorn or something, like this vague image of a unicorn or whatever it might be. Or we're thinking of something here that seems very vivid and real and present to us. And how can a mere conceptual representation of that thing do that work, play that role? Now. So what can the illusionists say? So one thing the illusionists can say here is that to some extent this is a problem for everyone. Many realists would agree that it's possible to represent oneself as having phenomenal consciousness without actually having it. After all, remember that many realists concede that zombies are conceivable. And zombies, of course, are creatures that are psychological duplicates of us. They have all the same mental states that we do in the functional sense, in the psychological sense. They have introspective states just like ours. They believe that they are phenomenally conscious in just the way that we do, even though they actually lack phenomenal consciousness. So
zombies represent themselves as having phenomenal properties. Is that a report he's talking about? The zombie, what he might be confused about whether or not it's a zombie, is saying, yeah, I have phenomenal properties. And then it's going to say, well, now I'm in doubt, or something like, I mean, what is this? I don't understand what he's saying, right? He's also mumbling in his beard there, right? But, though he doesn't have a beard. But it's sort of, oh, man. To some extent, right? Don't use to some extent, or in some degree, or at some point it seems like it could be like whatever, right? I need something that is a little more clear-cut philosophy than to some extent. This is a question for everyone. Oh, get it away from me, man, right?
Clearly zombies are going to represent themselves as having phenomenal properties. They're going to have some form of phenomenal concepts. So if zombies are conceivable, then it certainly must be conceivable that a creature could have phenomenal concepts without having phenomenality. And indeed, it's, if we remember from the discussion of the meta problem in the last lecture, it's many realists are willing to accept that the explanation of our phenomenal reports, our phenomenal judgments and reports, may not actually need to mention phenomenal consciousness itself. So, so again, this explanation will be given in terms of experiences and introspective processes in the psychological sense, in the functional sense, in the sense that involves informational and reactive processes. So again, it's probably going to have to refer to phenomenal concepts, which are doing the work of representing phenomenality without actually being sensitive to its presence, because we can tell the whole story about them without actually mentioning phenomenal consciousness at all. So it looks as if realists are also going to have to admit that it's possible to have phenomenal concepts, representations of phenomenality, without phenomenality itself. At least in some sense, maybe they would say that these are not full-blown phenomenal concepts, but something like phenomenal concepts, concepts that do, that at least produce the kind of, have the kind of effects that full-blown phenomenal concepts would have. And another thing that the illusionists will say is that there's no general problem in representing non-existent things. We can certainly do this. We can certainly think about things that don't exist. We can think about Father Christmas and
But, you know, non-existent things. A thing can't be non-existent because a thing is something that exists, right? So you can't say that thing doesn't exist. But if it's a thing, it exists because that's what things do, right? That's what the meaning of a thing is. That is something that exists. So it can't be non-existent thing, right? So I know it's sort of a matter of choosing the right words and so on, right? But the certain aspects here are, you know, the existence and so on. These are very important to get very clear about, right? So how can you represent something that is non-existent? I should back up a bit. Now, how can you claim non-existence? How can you make a claim about non-existence? Because that means you can't experience it, right? Or you haven't experienced it, I should say, right? So you can't say that it doesn't exist because you haven't experienced everything. But because you haven't experienced, you can't claim that it exists either, right? Until I experience a unicorn, I can't know if unicorns exist, right? So you can't claim that it doesn't exist just because you haven't experienced it. That's a stupid argument, right? And then you get to representing that which doesn't exist. Ah, man. And that is apparent no problem to represent something that doesn't exist. So you can represent it, but if you are represented, it's sort of a one-to-one or a particular kind of presentation of something that exists. But if it's non-existent, there can't be a representation of it, right? How would you understand how to represent something that doesn't exist? Because it doesn't exist. Oh, man.
Unicorns and so on. And indeed, we can.
No, but unicorn is just moving around stuff that does exist and combining it in a way that you haven't experienced yet, right? Horses can exist. I have experienced a horse, right? So I consider that to be something that can exist. Horns exist. I have seen, whales with horns and other, there's some other, at least there's some whales with a horn, right? If you take that horn, the concept of that horn and a horse in your mind and combine them, you can create something, yes. But that's just screwing around with your concepts, right? You can't say it's non-existent because you haven't experienced it yet, right? Non-existent is saying, I haven't experienced it yet. But that is the same as saying, you haven't experienced all that could possibly experienced. So you can't claim it doesn't exist because you haven't been everywhere, so to say, right? It's this stupid argumentation, man, right?
Think about things that couldn't possibly exist, like the impossible triangle, the Penrose triangle
No, but that's an abstraction. There were no triangles in you can experience, right? What color does a triangle have? What sound does a triangle have? What taste does it have? It has none of these. So you can't experience it. It's not a part of reality. It's purely a mental abstraction, right? You had to get to grips with fundamentals here, right? You're just arguing in midstream and thinking that you're smart. You're not. You're ignorant of basic stuff.
That we discussed. So certainly our minds have a capacity for representing things that don't exist. And it's not clear why there should be more of a problem in representing non-existent phenomenal properties. The illusionist is going to have to admit, I think, that the content of phenomenal concepts can't be fixed simply by causal connection.
Causal connections? What are those? What's the color of a causal connection? What's the sound of it? What's the taste of it? Does it have any of these? No. So these are just imaginations, right? Read some Hume. He challenges causation. With good reason. People talk about causation as if it's something that exists out there, right? That simple empirical test of checking, does it have a sound? Does it have a color? Does it have a whatever, right? These 5 external senses. If it has none of these, it cannot possibly exist, right? So I'm not saying that you can't discuss the idea of causation, but just be careful not to plant it in reality, right?
To the things they're about, in the way that the concept of dogs might be, the mental symbol for dog might get its content through being causally sensitive to the presence of dogs. The mental symbol for the qualia of redness can't get its content through being causally sensitive to the presence of that qualia, since the qualia is never present.
So if I was sitting in a lecture room with Keith Frankish here, right? And I said, Mr. Frankish, I have a question. Would he say, well, it's an illusion. I'm having an illusion now, right? Those are sounds. I'm having a phenomenal sound. I'm just ignoring it because it's an illusion. Or would he react to my question, which would be an interpretation of the sounds I make? So at what point does he say, I'm not going with this because it's an illusion? At what point is it actually something that I should not take seriously? I don't get it, man, right? In order for me to ask him a question, if I'm not an illusionist, right? I have to say, hey, Mr. Frankish, I have a question. I'm making a sound here, right? And then he'll have to say, well, that's just a phenomenal whatever, right? It's an illusion. And if he answers my question, is he then an illusionist? I mean, how would I understand that? I don't get it, man, right?
But that doesn't mean that that we can't give some account of how these concepts do get their content. But there are other accounts of mental content around, and there are plenty of options here, I think, for the illusionist. The illusionist can say perhaps that the content of phenomenal concepts is fixed by their functional role, by the effects they have in inference, for example. So the general idea here is that the content of a concept can be fixed by its relations to other concepts. So the concept of dog, say, is related to specific relations to other concepts, such as the concept of animal, a living thing, animal.
Animal, is that a concept? If dog is a concept, what is animal then? Isn't that just a category? You know, be careful, right? I can experience cat and dog and so on. And then I can sort of make an internal category saying animal, right? But I'm not experiencing animal. I'm either experiencing dog or cat or beaver or hen or horse and so on, right? I'm not experiencing animal. That's something I have attached to it that I might dig out as fast as I experience cat, for instance, and saying that's an animal. But that doesn't mean I have a concept called animal, right?
Pet barks, has 4 legs, wags its tail.
In order to hunt a deer, right? Would I need to have a concept called animal, or would it be sufficient for me to have a concept deer? I would say it's sufficient to have the concept deer. I don't need a concept animal. And that's why I'm saying it's not of a category, it's an artificial category to lump certain concepts together that had sort of kind of similarities, right? But that doesn't mean that it's a concept. If you're saying cat is a concept and dog is a concept, right? Then animal is not a concept. That's a category. It's an artificial category that encompasses certain concepts, right?
So, man's best friend. And it's these the relation, its position it occupies in a network of other concepts that make it the concept it is, the concept of dog. And similarly, the illusionist might say something similar about phenomenal concepts. They get to have their content by their relation to other phenomenal concepts and the relation to other non-phenomenal concepts. Spelling this out is going to be quite tricky, probably, but there's no reason in principle to think it can't be done. So really what we have here is not so much an objection to illusionism as
honestly, I'm completely lost here, representing the non-existent. I mean, I have no fucking clue what he's talking about, right? There might be a little bit here and a little bit there and talking about concepts and, but I have no clue what the hell we're doing, right? I mean, it's a mystery to me. What the hell? What kind of world is he living in, right? How does he use this in his everyday, right? Why does he feel he needs to do this? Can't he see any problems in what he's saying, right? Nobody challenging him. Nobody wanting to make sure that he makes some good philosophy. What the hell is going on, man, right?
A description of part of the illusionist program. This is certainly something illusionists need to think about and to produce an account of, and so it's really a part of the illusionist agenda rather than objection to the to the program itself. And we will have more discussion of that in the next lecture, where we look at the different ways in which the illusionist approach to consciousness might be developed. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture. That's our
That
brief.
just seems a bit backward, right? Shouldn't he wait with the objections to illusionism until he has fully developed the ideas? What was the lecture 5 is varieties of illusion? Shouldn't he wait, keep the objections until he has fully presented illusionism? I'm just sort of, what's the sixth? There must be 6. Okay, never mind.
Through some objections to illusionism. You may well have more objections of your own, and I hope we'll have a chance to discuss those together at some point. In the meantime, the next lecture will be on, as I mentioned, on varieties of illusionism. Illusionism itself is a very broad framework for thinking about consciousness, and within that framework, many different specific theories could be developed. And so next time we'll look at the different paths an illusionist can take, the different options that there are for the illusionist, and get a sense of the landscape of theories, the landscape of illusionist theories.
The landscape of illusionist theories. There's not only just one theory, there are multiple theories. 2 or more theories about this. It's like, I mean, get the fucking, I mean, oh man, right? I don't know what's, at this point, I'm more annoyed than anything. The feeling I'm left with at this point is, I'm just annoyed that people like this are getting airtime, while other good thinkers, where I might count myself in, right? You know, not to push my own agenda, anything like that. But you know, right? It's like, yes, if it was very coherent and very well argued, I might find 1 or 2 little flaws here and there. Then I would say, fair enough. Decent philosophy, right? I have no respect for this. This is a joke. I mean, what the hell is this, right? It's like if you go down to the car store, the car dealer, and then you get some kind of cardboard cutout thing instead of a car, and he says, "Yeah, that's a car." No, that's not a car. What do you mean it's not a car? So it looks like a car. It has no. Come on, man, right? You can't do this, right? This is so. It's not even. It's bad philosophy, okay, but it's worse than that. He's not able to do good philosophy, right? He doesn't understand what it means to do philosophy, apparently, right? He doesn't understand the certain deeper aspects that he needs to have settled in order to start talking about this stuff, right? And this sort of this pet subject kind of philosopher I have no respect for, because they are sitting in sort of an echo chamber of philosophy where the borderline of their philosophy is disconnected from the rest of philosophy. So they don't get these disconnections. They think it all looks great because it's sort of the rest of philosophy has been removed, and then they can create this perfect perfect quote, right? But that's why I'm always adamant about, you have to be a complete philosopher. You have to go from the deepest level of metaphysics to a moral principle, all the way, right? In order for things to hang together, you can't just sit there and look at, qualia and then mindfuck that into oblivion without connections to the rest of philosophy, right? And that's why I'm not buying this. First of all, it's crap philosophy, in my opinion. And it's also disconnected from the rest of, even though he uses the terms like true and then bring in concepts and ethics and so on, right? But it's sort of on the fly thing, right? This is crap, right? And I'm at this point, I'm like saying, I don't think I want to go any further with this, right? I think I have extended my opinion about this sufficiently, and I don't care honestly what avenues he thinks that he can go through using this kind of philosophy, right? Because it's stillborn from the start. So I don't care where he's going with it because it doesn't work, right? And if I would follow that road, I might be tempted to go there, even though I should not consider it because it's fallacious, it's faulty philosophy, right? So it doesn't really matter what lecture 5 and maybe 6, there must be a lecture 6, right? There's 6 parts. I don't really care what it entails, I would say, right? And I would also like to very much get out of this because I am sick and tired of Keith Frankish, to be honest, right? Oh, man. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Does this is it too much? Have I been too? Is it too far? Have I spent 30 hours or something on this, right, or more? Deconstructing it, though. I think it's important to deconstruct stuff like this, right? I am planning on taking on the next dude. At some point, maybe not today or tomorrow or maybe in the new year, but I don't know, maybe soon, right? This guy Tim Bain doing the problems of other minds, which I alluded to earlier in the part here, right? And I yesterday I listened through some of part 1 and some of part 2, and I have to admit, it sounds boring. It sounds academic lecture, boring, dusty academic lecture, right? With a so basic presentation style that it's almost hurts my eye, right? Okay, I don't want to poison the well, but I want to get, if there's one thing, there are a couple of things that I would really like to delve into. And one thing is the problem of the minds, and the other thing is the hard problem of consciousness, and sort of the status at the moment in academia about these things, right? So that's why I would like to get through this one, and I would like to do it a bit faster than the thing I did here with Keith Frankish, right? The Problems of Other Minds, lecture series by Tim Bain. So that might be upcoming in the coming days. But otherwise, if there's no further videos from me before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas and maybe even a Happy New Year. But I think I will be back before that time, right? So otherwise, share, like, and subscribe. Consider joining the Discord board. Maybe a donation if you think this is creative and useful stuff. Encourage me to do it again. Or maybe tell me that I shouldn't do it again, right? I was also considering making a review of the movie Avatar, The Way of Water, which is sort of Avatar 2, right? Which is, let's say, to me, quite disappointing, right? But I don't know. Maybe it's too fluffy, right? I did do something with Rings of Power, which also was extremely boring, and maybe boring it was, but disappointing, right? It's one of the biggest disappointments in the history of filmmaking, in my opinion. It's such a stupid, lazy, bad adaptation of anything Tolkien. It's sort of, he must be fucking spinning in his grave, right? Okay, I think that's enough from now. And this part is a 36 or 37, 36 maybe, right? And this is very, very likely the end of my deconstruction of Keith Frankish's lecture series on illusionism. And there you have it. See you in the next one.